Hi, everybody. Turn this around. So I'm Jane Thomas. I don't know if you can see me on the camera up there or not. Can they? Yep, okay. Okay, anyway. Patch and I are going to be talking about the National Environmental Science Program, the Northern Hub, and what we do in our kind of day-to-day lives as science communicators. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the Larrakia people, who are the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today and where Patch and I live and work. Also, the Walmatjarri people of the Kimberley, Yuaman people of North Queensland, Jawan and Mirarr people of Kakadu, and other Binning Mungoi people who are the traditional owners of the lands that the research we're talking about today is occurring. It's a lot of people. Okay, so the National Environmental Science Program, or NESP, is an investment of about $145 million by the Australian government into environmental and climate research to inform policy. So it's delivered through 6 themed hubs. You can see on the map there where they're kind of hosted, the 6 hubs. And this isn't going to work, is it? And you'll see us, we're up here in Darwin, hosted by Charles Darwin University. So the Tropical Water Quality Hub is kind of a geographically themed, but really, you know, we're the only geographically themed hub that covers like an entire large region of Australia. So it's wrapping up next year. It's been going, these hubs have been going for 6 years. So we're kind of in the final push of all the research results coming in. We're doing all the communicating of the results. So it's pretty busy from our end. Okay, so the Northern Australia Hub, that's a map of the basic region that we cover up there. It's kind of the northern flowing catchments, the river catchments. And so our goal is to deliver research that supports the sustainable development of Northern Australia. So our hub has been about $24 million plus in-kind support from partners over these 6 years. You can see all of our partners along the bottom there. And we're led by Professor Michael Douglas, who's in Perth at the University of Western Australia. But as a hub, we're hosted here at CDU, so Patch and I are here in Darwin. And the NESP hub builds on the Tropical Rivers and Coastal Knowledge Consortium and the National Environmental Research Program, which was the predecessor to NESP. So we have kind of these long established relationships with you know, users and stakeholders across Northern Australia. And the NESP 2, there is going to be another round of funding for NESP 2. It's currently, the bids have been submitted and they're currently under review. So, you know, there'll be an announcement sometime soonish on who the successful bids are for. It's only going to be 4 hubs for the next round, but so that's going to be continuing. And the research priorities of the hubs are set by the Federal Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment. So we have over 40 projects and 100+ researchers across all of these institutions and more that you can see along the bottom here. So what is supporting sustainable development in Northern Australia? So you can kind of think of 4 general themes of our research: de-risking conventional development, such as agriculture, supporting alternative economic opportunities such as carbon farming, planning for future development through things like scenario planning, and then managing threats to biodiversity like weeds, ferals and fire. So we do research all across Northern Australia, but we do have some focus regions where we have kind of project concentrations of activity. And those are the Fitzroy Basin in the Kimberley, the Daly Catchment and Kakadu National Park here in the top end, and then the Gulf, some Queensland Gulf catchments, the Archer, Flinders, Mitchell and Gilbert rivers that flow into the Gulf there on the western side of Cape York. So when we started, I asked all of our researchers to send me 3 words that describe Northern Australia to them and put them in this word cloud. And I think it's pretty, yeah, it's obviously a pretty dramatic way of thinking about Northern Australia. I haven't updated this in a while. It kind of fell off the priority list, but I still think it's pretty good. I think it captures Northern Australia pretty well from our researchers' perspectives. So our approach is a transdisciplinary approach. So we have researchers from environmental, social and economic fields, and it is user focused. So our audience is not the general public or other scientists, it is land managers and policymakers. They're our primary audience, so that's who our communication activities and products are designed for. And users are actually involved in our process from the very beginning, from the design of the project, identifying research questions that's going to be useful to them, signing research user agreements, which are basically letters of intent signed by our research users that they will use our research in policy or land management decisions if we deliver what we said we were going to deliver in the way that we said we'd do it. And we have ongoing engagement with our users throughout the life of the project. So it's not just a lot of research is done at the end. You have a publications plan of scientific papers, and then at the end it'll be like, well, I guess now we should communicate it. But we try to keep those lines of communication open throughout the whole life of the project, so that we can inform evidence-based policy. So this is kind of what I was just mentioning, this cartoon. A lot of researchers kind of do act this way, or they publish their papers and just be like, well, that's it. If the government person that needs to read that will find it and read it and incorporate it into their decision making, and that's like the miracle. And it doesn't really usually happen that way. So we try to be a bit more explicit there in step 2 and actually plan that out and make it happen. So this is a kind of framework of knowledge development and delivery, and the TRACK consortium kind of operated down in the inform and consult levels, which is anticipating user needs and being responsive to user needs. The NERP program kind of moved up a little bit and it started involving the users more in the research so that it was tailored to user needs. And then we're really trying to operate up here in the collaborate and empower. So the research meets the user needs and is by users and for users. And we achieve that through the communication, continuous two-way communication with users. So how does that work in practice? So the involvement of research users and the knowledge brokering and communications team, we're involved from the very beginning of the project. And the research users, they tell us what kind of research they want. They tell us what kind of timelines that they might have for management or policy, when they need to have information to make decisions, what ways they prefer to be communicated with. Sometimes it's a briefing, sometimes they just like to be on an email list, social media, fact sheets, videos. So we kind of tailor our needs, what we produce to their needs. And so we do have a quite diverse array of communication products and activities that we do. Not all of them are like sexy, but they're effective. And I'm going to hand over to Patch. This is the right time, isn't it? This is right. And he's going to go through in a bit more detail the actual our products and activities, what we do, with some examples.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I get to talk about some of the things we get to do, and as Jane said, it's not all glamorous, but there is a lot of cool stuff that we get to do, and there's a lot of interesting science that is behind it. So that's quite, it's quite a fertile space to work in, and it's exciting that we get to do that. As Jane was saying, sort of the whole way we work is that transdisciplinary and working with the users, and so finding out how they want information delivered is kind of just such a key part of that. So when someone says, the reports need to be there, the papers need to be there, it needs to be backed up, it needs to be supported by the science, that's never going to go away. But when they say they need to be there, but I want to see it in a 2-page document, I want it as simply as possible. I want to understand what's going on. I want the key points. So that's where things like fact sheets come in, and just making the information as accessible to the people that need it. So it's that getting the information to the right people at the right time in that right format that just drives how we do everything on a day-to-day basis. So you can see up on screen at the minute, there's a range of different fact sheets and publication styles. So we do look to find out how people want to receive that information, and use our range of different publications to meet those needs and those demands, to help supply the right information. a website remains sort of our primary repository of information, and as we sort of move beyond the life of the hub, like we look to ensure the legacy of all the research that's gone on, all of those 40 projects and the 6 years worth of data and analysis. The website is absolutely critical in how we do that. So we're constantly looking to how we can improve the accessibility, the searchability, and having that information hosted there, and again, communicating the results. So that's a constant part of our work, but it's also, we're also looking to draw on people who are doing it really well elsewhere. So on the right-hand side there is the Queensland Government wetland info website, where they've started using these things called story maps. And it's a sort of really, really interesting, really appealing way to display information for the web. Again, coming back to the point of, the reports and the papers need to be there. There was a comparison that some of the Queensland Government people talked about, where they had, a report, an annual report that would sit on a website and be downloaded a handful of times, across the year. Whereas the story maps, how they're now displaying this information, were clicked on like hundreds and thousands of times. So it's about being, keeping up with the way that things are changing and how people are engaging with information. Obviously, people are spending a lot of time on devices, even more so now, and finding really, really interactive and useful ways to display information rather than in many 100-page reports. Obviously, sort of the information can be the same, but if you're not displaying it correctly and getting it to the right people, then you're not going to achieve anything with it. So we've taken that on board, and we're using story maps to communicate some of our key information, particularly in those Queensland ones where it can match up and fit in with existing structures. Maps are another sort of, particularly in Northern Australia with such a broad landscape and such vast scales that we're working in, giving that sense of scale and communicating where the research is occurring and whose land it is, and all those sorts of things are really critical parts. So we get to use maps quite a lot, and trying to use them to show how the sort of water and resources and all of that exist in the landscape. Do you want to add anything else about that? No? Symbols. So this is probably one of the most exciting things that we've been chipping away at over the last few years, is that previously there was not a lot of good available resources to graphically represent Northern Australia. It's quite a distinct landscape, and we've been living and working in this area. You can recognise that, and that there weren't the resources out there to pull together diagrams and graphics to show that. So we've been working with an illustrator, and Jane herself has been working to develop some of these, and we've pulled together a set that is very near 100 symbols now that we'll soon be releasing, which is really exciting, because it's proved to be such an effective way. So there was an absence in flora and fauna and people, and we've been building up on that to better represent Northern Australia. So you can see some of the distinct Northern Australia fauna up there, and it's fantastic to have the plants and the animals. But definitely one of the most important things is that people often talk about Northern Australia like it's an empty landscape. It can sometimes be a bit sort of described in those frontier terms, which is completely inaccurate. So we've been working really hard to add to the representation of the people that live and work in Northern Australia, so that they can be depicted in the sort of scenarios, the graphic scenarios, and anything that represents Northern Australia. So that's been a really awesome project that we've been chipping away at. And yeah, do you want to talk about these ones? Sure.
So this is just kind of an example of how these symbols can be dragged and dropped onto kind of simple bases and put together to tell stories of different environments, you know, aquatic, terrestrial, pastoralism. And so you can see when you start putting them all together, it really kind of looks a bit familiar from when you're out in the bush or when you're in the Kimberley or, you know, at a billabong. So yeah, it's just kind of using these symbols as kind of a language or to start actually telling stories. And you'll see there's not an actual word on any of these diagrams, but it still tells a story that doesn't actually need, you know, English or any other language to describe. So it kind of transcends those kinds of barriers.
Yeah, so here's just another example of, you know, pulling together those symbols to tell more stories. And although there's sort of like the natural pictorial appeal of them, things like this one have appeared in published papers as well. So, you know, there really is that growing shift towards being able to accurately and graphically represent, you know, the scientific concepts that you're talking about. So yeah, it is really, it's been fantastic to sort of watch that our symbol collection grow and be able to better and more accurately represent Northern Australia. Another one just showing over using for the Gulf productivity and how migratory shorebirds come in and out of the systems over there. But yeah, using these symbols to really help with conveying the science in the best way that we possibly can. I really like the opportunity to use the symbols in little animations as well. So just again, continuing to sort of diversify the way that we're communicating the results. So showing a Saratoga moving about out around the Ranger uranium mine out in Kakadu, and then also being able to show even just direct research outputs. So this is a camera, sonar that one of our projects led by Dave Crook on behalf of sort of the CDU and working out in the Magilla Creek. So there's a school of catfish in that one. So just being able to incorporate that into how you're communicating again. So just having that diversity of communications products. And one more that I put together using some of the symbols that we've created, showing the damage that feral pigs can do when wetlands and waterholes aren't adequately protected. But yeah, just being creative with how we tell those stories to get the same messages across that you can have it in words, but finding new and exciting ways to do that. Yeah, so there's all of that stuff which we love and it's fun to show photos of, but arranging the opportunities for workshops and meetings and presentations, face-to-face engagement is also really critical. Or virtual, yes, sorry, virtual now. Virtual face-to-face.
We used to be able to.
This is all old school. I don't remember this. But that arranging those person-to-person engagements for researchers and end users brings us back to that transdisciplinary approach that Jane talked about and introduced at the beginning. And ensuring that these aren't, as Jane said, not just maybe the very first time, but at least not just at the very end, trying to make these a regular occurrence and having updates along the way where a component of a project is finished and you can say to government users or say to, you know, land managers like rangers, here's some updates, here's what we've found, and here's the way it might be applicable for you, or ask whatever questions you've got. So organising these are absolutely critical to the science communication process and making sure that it's a regular thing and not just an afterthought. That's sort of what drives our work and how we hope to achieve them. Have our science be as effective as possible in guiding the best decision making in Northern Australia. Yeah, so I mean, we can keep talking about what we do, but I guess one way to sort of help back that up is to let people talk about it. So this is from a project about the multiple benefits of Indigenous land and sea management programs, so beyond the environmental ones, led by Natalie Stokel, who's now at the University of Tasmania, but they did a series of interviews with traditional owners in the Kimberley and in North Queensland to try and to sort of assess some of those benefits. So I will.
Well, it's been of great importance to us because they've also made us open our eyes up and made us open our views on what we want to do on country. So, yeah, they've interviewed a lot of our Uruman people, and they've all expressed that they want to keep it as cultural as possible, sharing and caring. We've already started our 5-year strategy plan, but having Diane and Natalie on board it's just been of great benefit to us from their perspective, and speaking to people like them, it's been beneficial to us.
We found out a lot of information from the Yuin people about what was important to them and what their priorities were and what their aspirations were for their traditional country, because we don't necessarily get that out of people, just by getting to come to meetings and just general talk amongst the community. So that was one of the benefits about doing this project with JCU is finding out what was on everybody's minds and what they wanted for the future of not just Talbot but the Yuin country. Yeah, like, I'm just hoping out of this project that there's going to be a flow on effect, that this information will feed up to the top, and they'll realise that Indigenous communities do need more funding to help Indigenous people, aspirations, help their self-determination aspirations, and hoping that through Indigenous land and sea management projects, and this is one way of getting, obviously there's one way of getting people back on country. And
really the response from a lot of the people there that were the most beneficial, I believe, were that a lot of people, I think for the first time, or maybe not even the first time, but not very often, they expressed that they felt like their opinions about these sorts of things, including well-being, were valued almost when we spoke to them. So that was probably one of the most beneficial things that I feel like that they came away with from the research work, as well as having, all this really, really valuable data collected from the people who actually live in the community. So that was quite beneficial, I believe.
Because I live in Broome, I moved there when I was 7, and like over the years, I was going less and less back onto country, and then doing this, and I was meeting my family that I haven't seen in ages, and then like getting introduced to some of the elders that I probably haven't seen in 10 years. It was just really, I felt good doing it. So yeah, like the things that we asked them, like, how was it 5 years ago and how's it now? Huge difference, man. And I think like the land management program, I think they are doing such a good job. Like the elders that we spoke to, they were really proud that they had young people doing it and like going to the schools and like taking some of the kids out onto country and showing them what bush tucker is. It was just really awesome. And I learned that, like, I didn't even know that there was like that program till so my mum like kind of briefly talked about it and I was like, oh, you're gonna go do interviews? And I was like, okay, well, I'll do it. And then when I came and talked to Natalie and Otto, they were like, oh, like, and I was just like, whoa, like it's deadly.
Anyway, so that was sort of an initial version of what has become sort of a project for us called our impact videos, where we're looking to make the most of having been speaking to those research users and those land managers throughout the entire process. And because we've been doing that and been providing updates, we're in a place where we can get them to talk about the impact and how they've been using the science, so that, we're not asking them, oh, you remember that paper that got sent to you in an email? we're asking, oh, the project we've been working with so-and-so, how have you been using that? Which policy have you been using it? What changes have you made? So that's obviously with just under 12 months still to go, there's still a lot to happen, and that's still quite a big project for us as part of the communications and knowledge adoption team. But we've got a couple that we can show you. So we'll go on to the first one, which is a project that's building, again, another part of this is that it builds on the years and years of relationships that have been built up through previous programs, through TRAC, through NERP, and through the early years of NESP, and asking about what research people wanted and trying to fill the needs there. So this whole project kind of embodies that. It asks the Bining Mungoi traditional owners around the Kakadu, around the park and around that area, what they wanted. So I'll let the video tell you the rest of the story.
Our floodplain is our front door to our grocery shop. Our grandkids will have something in the future for them, something where they can go and do their own grocery shopping like the shops. My name is Simon Dempsey. I'm part of the Bunich clan, and I work for Kakadu National Park. I grew up in Kakadu, and the only thing that makes me sad is seeing the floodplain get engulfed up with this introduced species of weed. It was so amazing back then when you didn't have any paragraphs. It was just like walking out to a grocery store and just picking at what you need. But these days you can't do all that because you have to basically walk through this grass to get to where you want to get to. And it's just really so devastating looking at a place that's been changed after 45 years and then it's just all gone.
The work that we're doing out in Kakadu National Park started by talking to the people who are going to use that research. So we spent nearly a year working with park managers and traditional owners, asking them what research they would like to see happen in Kakadu so that we could better manage the park. Over the past 10 years, we've done research which has looked at what impacts paragrass is having on the native plants and animals that live on the floodplains. We've done work that can help us to predict where that paragrass might spread to in the future. And we've also done work to identify how that can impact upon traditional owners, how it affects the things that they're hunting, harvesting, and fishing for on the floodplains.
When we start talking with the traditional owners and finding out where they hunted in the past and where they can't hunt there anymore because the paragrass is there, and then also looking at where they're hunting currently, and then mapping all of that knowledge in with what the researchers did of actually showing us where that paragrass actually really likes to go. Paragrass went from being a massive problem that was kind of a little bit too hard, and it was only 17% we were going to lose in the next 20 years. All of a sudden, we were going to lose almost all of the turtle and the goose breeding grounds.
So cross-cultural monitoring is bringing new evidence to bear to help us make good decisions on the land. This is a vast, vast landscape, and it's handling some pretty complicated threats. So where do we start? How do we know actions are useful? We've got to collect evidence to help us there. So we choose with evidence from Indigenous people and science to choose our priority areas. We have an experiment. We start to manage those paragraphs. We then got to monitor that to see how well we did. This is really unique because we've brought technology into that monitoring equation. And that allows us to do this in this huge, vast area that's really hard to access together using AI, Western science, Indigenous knowledge and management expertise to guide that decision.
The best part about this project is the cooperation between the different stakeholders, between researchers with parks, the traditional owners, all working together to achieve an outcome that helps the Bining traditional owners and to help manage Kakadu.
The country looks after itself pretty much all by itself, but with the weed invasion, it needs a helping hand. And this project, working with the scientists, getting the feedback on the work that we're doing so we can actually see what's happening, it just makes such a difference.
Gives us purpose to basically get out there and do it.
When it's really hot and 40-degree temperature and the flies are atrocious, it doesn't matter because you know that you can see the result of what you were doing, and that managers can see and the world can see. It's a real privilege.
So hopefully, particularly Annie and Simon there sort of helped tell the story of the paragraphs on the Kakadu floodplains and how that the research that we've been doing has been meeting that need of theirs, and that's both from the park and from the traditional owners in the park. So we'll go on to one more of those, and it's a project about using environmental DNA and really showing sort of the strength of collaboration again, and being able to pull together a whole range of different sort of scientists with different expertise to meet the need of the NT government.
I think the eDNA project is a fantastic example of how collaboration should work and what the hub can do in terms of promoting collaboration. Well, the fact that species are rare makes them hard to sample. So it's a bit of a paradox, I guess, or a conundrum, in that they're often the species we're most interested in. They're also the species that are hardest to sample or to get a sense of what's going on, because they're rare and often you need to go out and do an enormous amount of sampling, a lot of sites, a lot of time, in order to detect enough of them to really get any scientifically robust idea of what's happening. We're always very keen for new techniques.
Environmental DNA is the action of collecting their DNA that they shed from their body when they drink or when they defecate or through their saliva, bathing and fighting and blood. Basically anything can be shed into the environment, and when it's shed into water it presents this unique opportunity of a nice collection of DNA.
Well, Gouldians were interesting because they're a problematic species to sample. They're actually quite hard to detect. If you just go out and look for them, they're really hard to find. They occur sparsely in the landscape and they move around, but they're an important species. They're quite an iconic species. They're a listed threatened species. They've come up in particular issues in terms of affecting where development can occur.
Gouldian finches are a good candidate for terrestrial species in the eDNA test, and that is because they are a graminivorous bird and they require water to drink every day, so they don't get their water requirements from the grass that they feed on. So they come to the waterhole, especially in the dry season, and when the water availability is quite limited, and they will then go down and drink and bathe. So they're a reliable candidate for trying to detect their eDNA from water bodies.
So the goal of the project was to determine whether or not we could actually develop a test for Gouldian finch, given that other finches drink in the same water body. And there's actually quite a lot of money and time that goes into developing what ends up being a really cost-effective test. And so we took a different approach to some of the other eDNA multi-species tests. We just were honing in on that particular species. So we could sequence the mitochondrial genome of each of those 3 finch species and then find regions of the DNA that were specific to the Gouldian finch.
After we determined that we could detect their signal and that we could detect it quite quickly, the next question was, how long does their DNA persist in the environment? What's the likelihood that you'll be testing a water body and potentially getting a signal when the birds are long gone? The NT government were the drivers for the waterhole testing, and also our relationship with the Jalen Rangers. They established that with us. We were really lucky that we have a really good working relationship with the NTG, and we built a wonderful relationship with the Jalen Rangers.
Well, we actually know where they are, but this year we had a really poor wet, so it's all about the water holes too. If there's not much waters around water holes, so probably they'll be somewhere else where the waters are. Yeah, you gotta actually go to the spots where the finches are drinking out of it. So that was really good for us to find about it, and just test it there and if the water been used a lot.
it offers incredible opportunity for groups like rangers, because collecting water samples is really a very easy procedure. There's a little bit of work to be done to make sure that the hygiene of them is good and that they're stored correctly and all that stuff. But it's an easy thing for a lot of people on ground to do, and potentially we could develop a monitoring regime that covered a lot of country that wouldn't otherwise be accessible.
I think it'll be really amazingly effective for covering a large land area, and particularly when the Northern Territory Government, if that identified particular regions that they know of sightings, but haven't done a lot of work, that maybe they're remote, they haven't had rangers or their own staff able to be out there. So it gives us a great opportunity to really spread our wings and see what the story really is for the Gordian finches.
I think the eDNA project.
Yeah, so hopefully, I guess you can see there that having the research users able to tell the story of the science going on is a kind of a testament to the process that we've been talking about, that transdisciplinary approach, and communicating with them all the way along and trying right from the very beginning about what the project looks like, what the research is. So I think that's kind of the sort of the key take home is doing that process the entire way along and just drawing on every tool at your disposal. You can see they're sort of giving you a snapshot of the things that we rely upon and the processes that we rely upon. But yeah, being able to use as many of them as possible and use them in conjunction and making sure that you're using the right ones for the right people is kind of the most important thing. But did you have anything?
That's the end of our presentation. So, do you have any questions?
First, I take the questions from the room, and then if there is questions from the people on the Zoom, they can ask afterwards. I know, he left.
How did the two of you get into science communications?
That's a good question. I have a science degree, an honours degree, but I kind of jumped into science communication straight after graduating with honours. And one thing that I've, always known is that there's no kind of one path to being a science communicator. And this presentation is an updated version of one we gave at the Australian Science Communicators Conference in February, it's an actual association of people, Australian science communicators. And going to the conference, you just see how varied and diverse all people are who call themselves science communicators. There was stand-up comics, there were musicians, there were people who host TV shows, and people from all different backgrounds, not necessarily science backgrounds. So yeah, we both have science degrees. Patch has a science and multimedia journalism dual degree. So that's kind of how that was our path, but there's many paths. And, when I started, there weren't any really, pardon? No degrees. No degrees, no kind of postgrad master's degrees or anything in science communication. But there are now, there's several across Australia that are pretty good. I think the University of Melbourne has a pretty good science communication postgrad degree.
Melbourne, ANU,
yeah. So yeah, there's not just one path to being a science communicator, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, this question is based on experience. When I used to do a vet course, and it did involve a bit of communication with rangers and traditionals. And one of the things they really tried to talk to us about was offering a solution to the problem at hand. Like, yes, you can come up with what's going on in the environment or whatever, but they always used to tell us that it is good to at least offer a solution to that. So do you also prioritize solutions to the problems in communicating the solutions to the problems that may occur?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of a core to our approach is, asking our research users, what knowledge gaps do you have? What research would help you to do your job better or make better decisions, design better policy, manage the land better? What do you need to know to help? And then we kind of design the project with them to answer those questions. So yeah, it's absolutely applied research, to end up being used by people, not just kind of in an academic publication, which is all well and good, and we do that too, but we definitely, have a target user or problem that we try to address or add knowledge to with the research. Yeah.
Any other questions? No? I'll Zoom. I think, Zoom. One more.
I'd ask, would you say communicating the topic, the issue at hand would be different towards people, I'd say the general public or the audience, or towards that of an academic? Would you say the explaining of that issue would be different? Like if you're to publish a paper, would it be different to, if you're to give it to a class of academics, would it be different to that of the ordinary person?
Yeah, definitely. We tailor all our products to who the primary audience is. And we actually have a science writer on our staff. She lives in Perth. So she, when we give her a brief of things to write, if it's a wrap-up fact sheet or a conversation article, for the website, The Conversation, the tones are very different, and she will target her language and her writing to most appeal to the audience that we're trying to reach. So yeah, reports, scientific papers, they're usually quite technical. Obviously, their goal is, or their audience is other scientists usually. But for the land managers and policymakers, it needs to be a lot easier to understand, a lot more accessible. Government employees, you don't have a lot of time to sit down and just read 20 research papers. They just want a summary or a diagram that they can, take out and engage with people using. So yeah, the language and the writing style that we use is definitely changes depending on the audience we're trying to reach.
And I guess I would just add on your behalf, if you don't mind, that, a project might put a journal article out, so that's in it's available to the science sort of community, but then you guys will also produce a fact sheet or something on that same subject. So you've got it available to multiple users. So the journal article's there for those who want to digest it in that format, and then there's those other formats with the same message but just translated into language that's accessible to multiple users.
Exactly. And whenever one of our researchers publishes a paper, we kind of have a workflow set up where we write, it's usually a paragraph just to summarize the paper. And so that has a few destinations. The Federal Department of the Environment has a fortnightly newsletter that comes out that just is all the news from the 6 different hubs. So we've got to submit something every 2 weeks. So that's often, a snippet about a paper that's come out. We use those snippets on social media. We put the paper up on our website. So there's all these kind of sources for papers, but they're not written. It's not just copying and pasting the abstract. It's like a very synthesized and easy to read, summary of the paper. And concentrating on the findings. Like we don't really talk about the methods, in the summary at all. Just a sentence of introduction and then like what it actually means and how it can be used or useful.
So do you account for possible miscommunication of the data? Like someone could read it and could think something else or completely opposite to what you found?
Well, yeah, I haven't really found that that's happened very much. I mean, maybe it does and we don't know about it, but our stuff is usually so targeted. And, our audiences are usually known to us. We do put our stuff on social media, of course, and we get, especially when we boost posts on Facebook, we get the weirdos coming out and writing comments and, they usually get deleted if they're particularly egregious.
I mean, I'm just looking at it from a general point of view. I'm just looking from a point of view, like, let's say the issue of climate change. You have people one side would read an article and they think, oh, carbon dioxide is evil. We must take it out, but that's not the case. So I'm just wondering, someone might read a portion of your information and might think one thing, but could be a complete opposite of what you're trying to communicate.
Sure, and yeah, like I said, I'm sure that happens, especially on social media, but that's not our primary audience. The general public is, we put the stuff on social media because we have the content that we've created for our land managers or our targeted research users. So, and then we put it out on social media because we have that content, we kind of make it work for us. But our end users, who are our primary audience, I don't think there's a lot of misunderstanding of what we're communicating.
Yes, but the public that could have a sway on the decision of the people you are trying to communicate to, isn't it?
How do you mean?
They could write petitions saying, oh no, we want this to happen.
Oh, sure. But yeah, we've never had that happen. No. Yeah.
I think we might have to. Very well. Thank you so much. That was an awesome talk.